The Swedes, one's own, Old English, Suiones, were a North Germanic tribe. The first author who might have written about the tribe is Tacitus, who in his Germania, from 98 CE mentions the Suiones.Jordanes. In the 6th century, mentions Suehans and Sueones. According to early sources such as the Sagas, especially Heimskringla, the Swedes were a powerful tribe whose kings claimed descendants from the god Freyr. During the Viking Age they constituted the basis of the Varangian subset, the Vikings that travelled eastwards. On the name. As the dominions of the Swedish kings grew, the name of the tribe could be applied more generally during the Middle Ages to include also the Geats. Later it again meant only the people inhabiting the original tribal lands in Svealand, rather than the Geats. In modern North Germanic languages, the adjectival form svensk and its plural svenska have replaced the name Svea and is today used to denote all the citizens of Sweden. The distinction between the tribal Swedes and modern Swedes appears to have been in effect by the early 20th century, when Nordisk Familjebok noted that svenska had almost replaced Svea as a name for the Swedish people. Although this distinction is convention in modern Norwegian, Danish and Swedish, Icelandic and Faroese do not distinguish between Svea and Sar in Skira svensk are as words for modern Swedes. Location. The primary dwellings were in eastern Svealand. The territories also very early included the provinces of Vestmanland, Södermanland and Nark in the Mälaren Valley, which constituted a bay with a multitude of islands. The region is still one of the most fertile and densely populated regions of Scandinavia. The territories were called Svealand, Swedeland, Swethiod, Swede people, Sveavedia, Sverige, Swede realm. The political unification with the Geats in Götaland, a process that was not complete until the 13th century, is by some contemporary historians regarded as the birth of the Swedish kingdom, although the Swedish kingdom is named after them. Sverige in Swedish, from Sverige, the kingdom of the Suiones. The Asir cult center in Gamla Uppsala was the religious center of the Swedes and where the Swedish king served as a priest during the sacrifices. Uppsala was also the center of the Uppsala Ode, the network of royal estates that financed the Swedish king and his court until the 13th century. Some dispute whether the original domains of the Suiones really were in Uppsala, the heartland of Uppland, or if the term was used commonly for all tribes within Svealand, in the same way as Old Norway's different provinces were collectively referred to as Nordmani. Etymology. The form Suiones appears in the Roman author Tacitus's Germania. A closely similar form, Suion, is found in Old English and in the Gesta Hamburgensis Ecclesiae Pontificum of Adam of Bremen about the Hamburg-Bremen archbishops who are denoted Sueons. Most scholars agree that Suiones and the attested Germanic forms of the name derive from the same Proto-Indo-European reflex of pronominal root *she, as the Latin sus. The word must have meant one's own. In modern Scandinavian, the same root appears in words such as svega and svajiska. The same root and original meaning is found in the ethnonym of the Germanic tribe Suebi, preserved to this day in the name Schwaben. The details of the phonetic development vary between different proposals. Norn proposed that Suiones is a Latin rendering of Proto-Germanic *Swionas, derived from the Pi root *swih one's own. The form *Swionas would in Ulfilas's Gothic become *Suehans, which later would result in the form Suiones that Jordanes mentioned as the name of the Swedes in Getica. Consequently, the Proto-Norse form would have been *Suionas, which following the sound changes in Old Norse resulted in Old West Norse Svea and Old East Norse Swear. Current frequently, however, the root for one's own is reconstructed as **she rather than **swih, and that is the root identified for Suiones e.g. Impokornes 1959 in Doggermanisches etymologisches Wörterbuchen in the 2002 to the Nordic languages, an international handbook of the history of the North Germanic languages edited by Oscar Bandel. *SWE is also the form cited by V. Friesen, who regards the form Suehans as being originally an adjective Proto-Germanic *Suionas, meaning kindred. Then the Gothic form would have been *Suehans and the H in Sueons a parenthesis. The Proto-Norse form would then also have been *Suionas, which also would have resulted in the historically attested forms. The name became part of a compound, which in Old West Norse was Svdjoth, a sutir thunoswothiaus. The 13th century Danish source Scriptores Rerum Danicum mentions a place called Little-Swathiathi, which is probably the island's Freyr near Stockholm. The earliest instance, however, appears to be Suiones.Jordanes. The only Germanic nation having a similar naming was the Goths, who from the name *Gutans created the form Guthiuda. The name Suevia and its different forms gave rise to the different Latin names for Sweden, Suthia, Suatir and Sucha, as well as the modern English name for the country. A second compound was Sviariki, or Sweonas in Old English, which meant the realm of the Suiones. This is still the formal name for Sweden in Swedish. Svea Riken, the origin of its current name Sverige with the K in the old form Sverige changed to a. History. The history of this tribe is shrouded in the mists of time. Besides Norse mythology and Germanic legend, only a few sources describe them and there is very little information. Romans. There are two sources from the 1st century AD that are quoted as referring to the Suiones. The first one is Pliny the Elder, who said that the Romans had rounded the Cimbric Peninsula where there was the Caudonian Gulf. In this gulf there were several large islands, among which the most famous was Scandinavia. He said that the size of the island was unknown, but in a part of it dwelt a tribe named the Suiones.Jordanes in 500 villages, and they considered the country to be a world of its own. What strikes the commentators of this text is that this large tribe is unknown to posterity, unless it was a simple misspelling, a misreading of Suiones.Jordanes. This would make sense, since a large Scandinavian tribe named the Sueons was known to the Romans. Tacitus wrote in AD 98 in Germania 44-45 that the Sueons were a powerful tribe with ships that had a prow in both ends. He further mentions that the Sueons were much impressed by wealth, and the king's thus was absolute. Further, the Sueons did not normally bear arms, and that the weapons were guarded by a slave. After Tacitus' mention of the Sueons, the sources are silent about them until the 6th century, as Scandinavia still was in prehistoric times. Some historians have maintained that it is not possible to claim that continuous Swedish ethnicity reaches back to the Sueons of Tacitus. According to this view, the referent of an ethnonym and the ethnic discourse have varied considerably during different phases of history. Jordanes. In the 6th century, Jordanes named two tribes he calls the Suehans and the Sueones, who lived in Skansa. They were famous for the fine horses. The Sueons were the suppliers of black fox skins for the Roman market. Then Jordanes names a tribe named Sueones, a name that is considered to refer to the Sueons as well and to be the Latin form of Suevia. The Sueones are said to be the tallest of men, together with the Dani, who were of the same stock. Anglo-Saxon sources. There are 3 Anglo-Saxon sources that refer to the Swedes. The earliest one is probably the least known, since the mention is found in a long list of names of tribes and clans. It is the poem Widsith from the 6th and the 7th century. On line 32, Ongen is mentioned and he reappears in the later epic poem Beowulf, which was composed sometime in the 8th–11th centuries. The poem describes Swedish-British wars, involving the Swedish kings Ongen Other, Wandler and Eagles, who belonged to a royal dynasty called the Scythings. These kings might have been historical, as kings with similar names appear in Scandinavian sources as well. There appears to be a prophecy by Wiglaf in the end of the Epic of New Wars with the Swedes. When more reliable historic sources appear, the Geats are a subgroup of the Swedes. The third Anglo-Saxon source is Alfred the Great's translation of Orosius's histories, with appended tales of the voyages of Othere of Hallgerland and Wulfstan of Hedby, who in the 9th century described the Sueon and Sueland. Othere's account is limited to the following statement about Sueland: on his Tomnes Dhm land Sotherwerdum on Othre Heelfthes Moors Sueland Othtare land Northerweird and Tomnes Dhm land Northerwerdum Quina land. Then Sweden is along the land to the south on the other side of the moors, as far as the land to the north, and Finland along the land to the north. Wulfstan only mentions a few regions as being subject to the Sueons. Then, after the land of the Burgundians, we had on our left the lands that have been called from the earliest times Blekinge, and Meor, and Eoland, and Gotland, all which territory is subject to the Sueons, and Wiernodland was all the way on our right, as far as Weissel mouth. Frankish sources, the Annalbertiniani, relate that a group of Vikings, who called themselves Rose, visited Constantinople around the year 838. Fearful of returning home via the steppes, which would leave them vulnerable to attacks by the Hungarians, the Rose travelled through Germany. They were questioned by Louis the Pious, Emperor of Francia, somewhere near Mainz. They informed the emperor that the leader was known as Chakanus and that they lived in the north of Russia, but that they were Sueons. Adam of Bremen, dealing with Scandinavian affairs. Adam of Bremen relates in the 11th century Gesta Hammerbergensis Ecclesiae Pontificum that the Sueons had many wives and were severe on crime. Hospitality was an important virtue, and refusing a wanderer to stay of the night was considered shameful. The visitor was even taken to see the host's friends. The royal family is of an old dynasty, but the kings are dependent on the will of the people. What has been decided by the people is more important than the will of the king, unless the king's opinion seems to be the most reasonable one, whereupon they usually obey. During peacetime, they feel to be the king's equals, but during wars they obey him blindly, or whoever among them that he considers to be the most skillful. If the fortunes of war are against them, they pray to one of the many gods, and if they win, they are grateful to him. Norse Sagas. The Sagas are our foremost source for knowledge, and especially Snorri Sturluson, who is probably the one who has contributed the most. His descriptions sometimes concur with, sometimes contradict the previous sources. For a continuation, see History of Sweden.